Have you ever noticed that the most meaningful moments in life were also the quietest? It wasn't during the shouts, the speeches, or the applause. It was in that wordless, tight embrace. In the tear that rolled down in complete silence. Or in that instant when life taught you something without saying a word. In this video, I'll show you why silence may be the wisest teacher you've ever had. You'll understand how it has the power to heal, to bring people together, to reveal truths that words can't express. And who knows, by the end of this talk, you might realize that the silence that once bothered you was actually a gift from life. If you're over 60, you've lived long enough to know that time changes how we experience the world. You start valuing what once seemed small, and you begin to realize that often the most precious things make no noise at all. This video is for you if you miss being truly heard. For you if you've learned the hard way that not everything can be fixed by talking. And for you if you've discovered that, after all these years, silence can be a refuge, not a punishment. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll hear today may not come in words, but it will echo inside you for a long time. Get ready. Silence has something powerful to tell you. When the world shouts, silence embraces. Have you ever felt like the world was just too loud? Like everything around you was pushing, demanding, rushing you, and all you wanted was a minute to breathe. It's like living in a never-ending storm. Phones that never stop ringing, notifications constantly blinking, people talking over each other, opinions being thrown back and forth. And in the middle of all that chaos, you're struggling to find just a little space for yourself. But the world won't let you. It seems programmed to never allow silence, to keep your mind always busy, your attention always outside yourself. And when you try to unplug, guilt creeps in, as if stopping were wrong, as if resting were a waste of time. I lived like that for years. Without even realizing it, I went into autopilot, where everything around me was noisy, and inside me, silence was screaming for help. Until one day, unplanned and unhurried, I simply sat in the backyard. It was an ordinary afternoon. The sky was partly cloudy, a light breeze blowing, and I sat under a tree that had always been there, but that I'd never truly noticed. I didn't bring a book, didn't bring my phone, didn't bring anything. Just me and the sound of the world as it is when you actually stop. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, a dog barking in the distance. At first, I'll admit, I felt a little uncomfortable, like I was doing something wrong. But slowly, I realized something that changed my life. The silence started keeping me company, and it wasn't an empty silence, the kind that unsettles you. It was a silence full of life, of presence. It didn't judge me, didn't demand anything, didn't tell me what I should do. It just was there, like an old friend sitting beside you who doesn't need to say a word. And in that moment, I understood something no book, no lecture, no conversation had ever taught me. Silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's what gives us the chance to hear what really matters. Not the voices outside, but the one inside. The one we spend years ignoring, drowning out, afraid of what it might say. And there, under that tree, I realized how far I'd drifted from myself, how I'd been more worried about what others wanted from me than what I needed. And silence, with all its calm, slowly reconnected me. It showed me I didn't need to have all the answers. That, in truth, much of wisdom lies in listening, not speaking. That sometimes, when the world shouts, the best thing we can do is stay quiet, take a deep breath, and simply listen. And maybe you, listening to me now, need this too. Maybe you're carrying a weight you can't explain, a tiredness that doesn't go away even after sleeping, an emptiness no noise can fill. If that's the case, I invite you to do the same. Find a quiet corner just for you. It could be the backyard, the porch, even the silence of a closed room. Sit down, breathe, don't bring questions. Don't expect answers. Just be present. And let silence embrace you, because deep down, silence is a form of love. A love that doesn't demand, doesn't compare, doesn't shout. A love that simply is. And if you make space for it, it gives you back to yourself. And that is worth more than 1,000 words. The conversation that never happened. Some conversations change the course of a life. Others never happen. And it's the silence of those that echoes the loudest inside us. For a long time, I carried a conversation in my heart that I never had with my father. It wasn't an argument, not an apology. It was something subtler, and because of that, deeper. It was a simple "I understand you," that neither of us ever spoke aloud. My father was a quiet man. Hardworking, strict, the kind who woke up early, drank his coffee in silence, and faced the day without saying much. Sometimes, we mistook that silence for coldness. I grew up thinking he didn't care much, that the absence of words meant an absence of love. And that belief dug a chasm between us, small at first, barely noticeable. But over time, it became a wall too thick to cross. When I was young, I tried many times to start a deeper conversation with him, but the words always stuck in my throat. They felt out of place against the armor of his silence. Eventually, I stopped trying. I kept everything to myself, the hurts, the doubts, even the affection. You get used to another person's silence, but it never stops aching. And so, the years passed. Life rushed on. And that conversation never happened until he was gone. It was quick. A heart attack, a hospital, and suddenly, he wasn't here anymore. It took a while for reality to sink in. But what hurt the most wasn't his absence, it was the absence of what we never said. I found myself replaying every gesture, every expression, every silence, as if they were clues to what he'd felt. And I wondered 1,000 times, did he know how much I wanted to talk to him? Did he know that even without words, I loved him? Then, on one of those days when grief hits without warning, I decided to go through an old box of papers. It was full of documents, yellowed receipts, photographs. And there, tucked between the pages, I found an envelope, folded, unaddressed, undated. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a letter. Just one page, in his handwriting. The letters were firm, a little uneven, but undeniably his. And on it, just one sentence. Not everything true needs to be spoken. I love you, even in silence. I cried like a child. Not because of the letter, but because in that moment, everything made sense. The conversation that never happened had been there all along. Quiet, waiting, hidden in the folds of time. And his silence, which I'd mistaken for indifference, had actually been his way of loving. A love that was quiet, restrained, but whole. That day, I learned a lesson I carry with me to this day. Some people love in silence. They don't know how to put feelings into words, but they show them in gestures, in presence, in glances. And more than that, I learned that silence, when it comes from the heart, speaks. Sometimes even louder than any words. If you too have an unresolved conversation, someone you wish you'd spoken to more, or listened to better, know this. The silence between you may not be the end. It might just be a different kind of communication. A language only time and love can translate. And maybe now, after all this time, I finally heard what my father spent his whole life trying to tell me. That his love for me never needed words. It just needed presence. And even gone, he's still with me, in the quiet of memories, in the echo of missing him, and in the certainty that sometimes, the most important conversations are the ones we feel. Even without hearing, the power of listening with your heart. Nowadays, everyone wants to talk. Talk louder, talk first, talk over each other. It's like we're in a race to see who can express themselves the most, but hardly anyone wants to listen. And when they do listen, it's only to reply, not to understand. as if listening has lost its value. But I learned from someone very special that true listening is a profound act of love, and that often, healing begins in the attentive silence of someone who listens with their heart. My grandmother, Donna Clarice, was like that. A simple woman from the countryside, hair always tied in a bun, wearing that old apron like it was a sacred robe. She wasn't one for many words, but she had a rare gift. She knew how to listen. And not just to what you said, she listened to what you didn't say. Her eyes asked questions without speaking. The way she put the kettle on the stove, the way she adjusted the chair for you to sit in, all said, "I'm here. Say what you need, or say nothing at all if you'd rather." I remember one of her neighbors, Donna Estella, a lonely widow whom everyone called repetitive. She'd tell the same stories, the same old tales, the same sorrows from years past. Most people avoided her, impatient. But not my grandmother. She'd sit on the porch and say, "Estella, tell me again about that garden you planted with your husband." And Donna Estella would tell it, her eyes shining, as if that moment was the only place where she was still heard, where her story still mattered. And me, sitting beside my grandmother, would watch and not understand. "Grandma, why do you listen to it all again if you already know what she's going to say?" She'd smile, run her hand through my hair and say, "Because it's not about what she says. It's about how she feels when someone listens." It took me years to understand what that really meant. Now, after so many losses, after so much silence, I get it. Some people don't want advice, don't want answers, don't want to be corrected. They just want to be heard. They want someone to listen with an open heart, no rush, no judgment, no phone in hand. Because sometimes the loudest cry for help comes disguised as an ordinary conversation, hidden in an old memory, in repetition, in a detail that seems small to those who only listen with their ears, and listening with your heart. That's rare, that's beautiful, that's human. The truth is, when we truly stop to listen to someone, we're saying, "You matter to me." And that phrase, even unspoken, has the power to transform. Sometimes it changes a person's day. Sometimes it changes their whole life. I think about how many times I've wanted to be heard, not interrupted, not corrected, just listened to. And I realize that all of us at some point carry words trapped inside that just need a kind ear to set them free. A welcoming silence, a space where pain can breathe without being rushed. So today, if I can leave you with one piece of heartfelt advice, listen to someone, but listen with your heart. You don't need answers. You don't need to know what to say. Just be there. Look them in the eyes. Let the silence speak along with them, because that kind of listening is pure love. And in a world this loud, being a quiet place of warmth is a rare gift. My grandmother has been gone for many years, but I still hear her voice when I pause to listen to someone. And every time I listen with my heart, I feel her beside me, smiling, whispering, "That's how you love in silence." The silence that heals. Some wounds don't close with time. They stay hidden beneath the skin of memory, waiting for a chance to breathe. And no matter how hard we try to ignore them, to pretend they don't hurt anymore, all it takes is a gesture, a look, an absence, for everything to resurface. Sometimes, these pains come from words poorly spoken. Other times, they're the result of words never spoken at all. For me, it was both. And I only understood that when silence walked through the door and healed something I thought was beyond repair. It was with my brother. We grew up together, playing on the same sidewalks, sharing the same room, the same glass of juice, the same tense silence at dinner when our parents argued. We had an almost automatic connection, but over time, life pulled us apart. Not just because of routine, but because of pride, unresolved hurts, arguments that grew until they became walls between us. That one day, we fought badly over something stupid, like most fights. But the words that came out were harsh, cutting, and in the end, neither of us apologized. The silence that followed was thick with pride. Years passed, and the distance became normal. We saw each other at birthdays, but only out of obligation. Barely even looked at one another. Neither of us would bend. Neither would admit how much it hurt. Until one day, the news came. He was sick. Seriously. Something with his liver. Hospitalized, weakened, his face carrying the weight of someone who'd been forced to confront his own reflection. I hesitated before visiting. Part of me said it was pointless. Another part, like a wounded child, screamed, "You still care." And that part won. I went. I walked into the hospital with my heart pounding, like stepping into the past. When I opened the door to his room, he was there, thinner, but with the same eyes from when we were kids. And when he saw me, he didn't speak. Neither did. I thought it wasn't necessary. We just looked at each other. And then, in a gesture that would have been impossible years before, he reached out his hand. I took it. We stayed like that, in silence, for minutes. Maybe longer. Time stopped. In that silence, the weight of resentment fell away. The need to be right disappeared. Pride evaporated. All that was left was presence. And within that presence, something rare, forgiveness. The silence didn't apologize. It didn't explain the past. It didn't justify our mistakes. It just gave us space to be human again. Brothers, vulnerable, and somehow healed. I left that hospital lighter than I'd entered. Because in that room, without a single word, something happened that no conversation in the world could have fixed. Silence was the medicine. And it worked. A lot of people believe that to heal a relationship, you have to talk. Open your heart. Expose the wounds. And yes, sometimes that's true. But other times, it isn't. Sometimes, healing comes when you stay quiet. When you let the other person simply exist in front of you, undefended. When you look them in the eye and say everything. Without saying a word. Since then, I've carried that lesson close to my heart. True silence is full of presence. It can dissolve wounds that no explanation can reach. It takes us out of the realm of reason and straight into the territory of the heart. And the heart, when touched in silence, understands, feels, and little by little, rebuilds. If you too carry a heavy silence with someone, know that the same silence can be the bridge to healing. Maybe it doesn't need words. Maybe it just needs a look, a gesture, a presence. Because in the end, what heals isn't always what's said, but what's allowed to be felt. And in that hospital room, face to face with my brother, I understood that with perfect clarity. Silence can be the last chance to love. And when used well, it can also be the deepest. The sound of solitude. There's a kind of silence that doesn't teach you right away. It arrives heavy, like it's made of concrete. And when it enters your home, it fills every corner. It isn't peaceful. It isn't light. It isn't comforting. It's the silence of solitude. An emptiness that echoes off the walls, in the empty chair at the table, in the pillow that stays smooth on the other side of the bed. When this silence arrives uninvited, it frightens. And for a long time, I feared it like you'd fear your own shadow. When my wife passed after 42 years of marriage, this was the silence that remained. It wasn't just the absence of her voice. It was the absence of the life that had moved around her. The sound of her slippers in the hallway, the kettle whistling in the kitchen, the way she'd hum softly while watering the plants. All of it gone. Suddenly, all I had left was the ticking of the clock and the muffled noise of the world outside. It felt like time had frozen inside the house while outside, it kept turning, merciless. In the first days, I tried to fill the silence. I turned the TV up louder than necessary, left the radio playing all day, sought out any noise at all, as if that could chase the loneliness away. But it was useless. Because real loneliness isn't about what you hear, it's about what you feel. And it lives inside you, not outside. Then I started doing something different. Instead of running from the silence, I sat with it, faced it, head on, like an old acquaintance I hadn't spoken to in years. I sat on the couch, turned everything off, and just listened. Listened to what was left. The sound of wind through the window. The creak of the house's aging wood. The passing seconds, and most importantly, the sound of my own breathing. At first, it made me cry. Because deep down, I was meeting myself again. And the silence, which had seemed like my enemy, was showing me that I was still here, alive, present, and that even without her, I still had a life to live. I realized there are two kinds of loneliness. The kind that pulls you away from life, and the kind that reconnects you to it. The first is bitter, desperate. But the second, if you give it space, can be transformative. It's where you learn to hear yourself again, to remember what you like, what you feel, what you want. It's where you realize that even alone, you're still whole. I started walking in the backyard more attentively. Noticed the flowers she'd planted that I'd never paid attention to. Listened to the birds with curiosity, as if for the first time. And for the first time in years, I sat down to write my thoughts in an old notebook. It was as if, in the silence of solitude, I was finally hearing my own soul. Little by little, I understood that the silence that once hurt me was now holding me. It became a place of reunion. A territory of longing, yes, but also of living. Memory, because deep down, she never really left. She was there in the small things, in the details, in the sound of my own heartbeat, carrying everything we'd lived together.